Welcome. I'm Clark Korb, a holistic health practitioner offering some pragmatic insights to help you live a happier, more empowered life and embody your optimum potential. Today, I will be sharing my perspective on taking a leap of faith when making significant life decisions. I'll share a bit of my own background, my story, what led me to change course in my professional career, and also reflect on how I've learned to blend intuition with rational, more linear thought processes, which have helped guide my course of action along the way. So as a child, I had interests in music, math, and computers from a very early age. And I had actually considered going into music as a profession from middle school through maybe early high school. And when I was introduced to physics in my junior year of high school, that really piqued my interest in engineering. This was the first time I saw math and the real world really connect to each other rather than just being something theoretical in the math realm. And I, in particular, enjoyed electrical circuits and electromagnetic theory. And in listening to my teacher talk about the benefits of working as an engineer, I liked the idea of more of the traditional lifestyle, the having a stable income, having a steady job, having the American dream, the time, the energy, the resources to be able to support a wife and family. And so all of this seemed very attractive to me. And so I went in to study engineering, electrical engineering in my undergraduate degree. So I was hired right out of undergraduate school. And even though I wanted to pursue my graduate degree, this was a fantastic arrangement since I could work full time and study in graduate school part-time and have the company reimburse me for tuition. I loved learning. I loved learning in grad school. I loved learning at the company, and it was a wonderful place to find mentors in the technical realm. And I also soon encountered the inertia of a large company. I found out what it was like to be pigeonholed in a first assignment and ultimately fought a bit of an uphill battle to gain the kind of experience that I wanted to gain. And I remember kind of early on that I wasn't particularly happy, and I had the sense that I had to cross off my checklist of goals and then I would really be happy. So once I finished grad school, once I got certain project experience, maybe getting into management, that I would ultimately feel satisfied and really happy in my career. But I did notice early on that there was kind of an internal misalignment. I wouldn't have necessarily labeled it as such at the time, but I was aware of these things, that I wasn't satisfied with my work, the environment. There was very little creative outlet for me, and especially as the years went on, there was very poor work-life balance or no work-life balance, certainly in the way that I was engaging at the company. And I was really starved for meaningful interaction with people. This isn't the kind of thing that I was ever presented with as a question going through schooling or early experience in work, that is this something that really matters to you? I guess it's one of those things you kind of have to find out with experience. And I wanted to feel more meaning or purpose in my work. Not that the company I worked for wasn't providing technology that helped people in their way of life. It certainly does. I certainly benefit from it every day, as I think most of us do. But I had a growing sense that a large part of who I am or what I had to offer would never be expressed in the current job that I had, regardless of title, regardless of experience, regardless of any promotions or time spent at the company or even in the industry. And after 7 years on the job, I ultimately resigned, wanting to address all of the above misalignment. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I felt confident in my skills, in myself, and in my education and my experience. And I really knew internally that I needed to be in a different environment in order to make a good decision about what to do next. I didn't want to just jump from the frying pan to the kettle, so to speak, and be in a similar situation or similar misalignment in a different company and more or less reliving the same experience. So after I resigned, I really did a deep dive into my own internal value assessment. I knew I wanted to be happy, I wanted to be healthy, I wanted to work with people, I wanted to do something that felt meaningful, that had an element of creative satisfaction, and if possible, I really had the itch to be an entrepreneur. And I really don't know what made me take this next leap into the career that I'm currently in, which is as a holistic health practitioner and a body worker. And even though I can't remember what steps actually made me look at this particular path, I remember thinking at the time, if I held an open mind and sincerely was following this path aligned with my values, I would find answers. And somehow it came to my awareness. At the time, there was a class offered at a local holistic health college. It was the International Professional School of Bodywork, which unfortunately went out of business years ago. But they offered an intensive study in what they called their essentials class. It was sort of a precursor to matriculating in their program. And this really struck me as a much needed palate cleanser for myself. It would be a drastically different environment from the corporate and the technical world that I had been in for 7 years. And at the very least, I considered it to be a personal development exercise and something that might inspire me or be a springboard to something different. And why bodywork? I really honestly don't know why this drew me. I only had very basic exposure to bodywork in the past. Every time I got my haircut once a month, I would go in for a combination circulatory and deep tissue massage that's standard at a day spa. Very different from the kind of work that I do now, as it turns out. And when I was enrolled in this immersive introductory class, I had a few very surprising discoveries. I learned that I was an auditory and kinesthetic dominant learner. This is something that wasn't even presented to me in school before, and that I could intuit information by just merely touching and having hands-on connection with people, with their body, to feel what's going on. It felt very natural for me to work with people in a hands-on fashion this way. And so I decided to matriculate into their program and pursue this as a profession. Once I was moving along this path, I was introduced by a friend of a friend to another mentor of mine outside this program. His name is Mark Lamb, and he founded a bodywork modality called BioSync. And I went through a training program and mentorship with him for basically a year while I was also completing my holistic health practitioner program for bodywork. And he provided a very early influence for me in the direction of study and ultimately what would guide my private practice. And the private practice that I started was really a synthesis of this biosync work and also something called craniosacral therapy, which came from osteopathy, sensory repatterning, which involves some passive joint movement, and a little bit of neuromuscular therapy thrown in for good measure. And I won't go into great detail here about what each of those modalities are, but I will say that I've used them as building blocks in a way to not really switch between each of them like switching gears, but rather synthesize my own work that incorporates the best principles of each that work together. And I hope a lot of people do that with their own work. And in addition to this, I've engaged in a lot of other training and have had some fantastic mentors in healing modalities outside of bodywork. And ultimately, if I were to summarize everything, I would say my general intention is to focus on results that are guided by intuition. When people ask what I do or how it's different, the short answer is that I offer is that it's to help unwind dysfunction in soft tissue. And really, it's still very results-oriented, kind of coming from my engineering background, but also guided by intuition in terms of how we listen to and work with the body. And as of this fall, it will be the 20th anniversary of my signing a lease to be in private practice. And it's been something that's continued to evolve over the years and has brought me so much joy and fulfillment. And along with this, there's also been kind of a teaching subset. Early on, after starting my practice, I taught classes for a few years at the Bodywork School, the program I'd matriculated from, and I saw this as an opportunity to empower other healers. I only taught the business courses there. I felt like that was the best service that I could offer, even though I didn't have formal business training on my own. I felt that my engineering background, from more of a linear and systems and problem-solving perspective, along with my penchant for numbers and enjoying numbers and wanting to help bridge that gap for folks who had huge healing hearts but maybe were a little bit concerned about the business and logistics side of things, that I could offer a bridge to show them what I've done and how I've been able to start a practice and maybe take some of the fear out of that and help them have some tools to empower themselves that way. So I've certainly enjoyed teaching and kind of still have the teaching bug, although I haven't yet felt the strong pull to set up a teaching program for the sort of unique synthesis I have for bodywork, at least yet. So the desire to teach still persists, and that leads to my latest leap of faith, which is starting this YouTube channel, which I began roughly 2.5 months ago. And this is something that I've been kicking around for quite some time. I would say the ideation of it began around 2020 during COVID lockdowns. I honestly hadn't watched YouTube very much, but I certainly began watching it a lot more at kind of as my primary screen time at home. And I liked the idea of the quality of content I was able to see on YouTube, that I liked learning, and I liked that it was more curated content. I was not a fan of social media at all in general. I found it to be kind of a noisy environment, but I really liked a lot of what I was able to find on YouTube. And so as I was forced to spend, like many of us were, more time at home until I could restart my practice full time, I liked the idea that maybe I could offer some sort of teaching element in these small, digestible, easily shareable, free chunks that I was able to enjoy myself on YouTube. And I thought, how could I shape what I've learned and what I do in a way that would be accessible to people in this particular medium? In addition to this, I noticed that during my practice over the years, even though I'm not a therapist, haven't had any specific training in traditional talk therapy or psychology, but I have been a student of personal development, for some time, certainly since the beginning of my practice and even before then. And in the course of working with people over the years, I've also been a witness to other challenges that they've overcome in their lives or offering suggestions. And I also began gathering feedback that the practical advice that I offered to people, not everyone, but where it came up, where it was applicable, offering some insights where people would share things that they're stuck with in life. In addition to just as we're doing body work, I would share from my own presence and listening and things that I've learned in terms of recognizing patterns and developing my own intuition in terms of what's going on, primarily to help access where people are stuck in their body, but it of course has an implication on where they may also be stuck in terms of emotional or certainly belief systems, these kinds of topics that are basically showing up here on the YouTube channel. All of this has been inspired by elements that I've discovered either for myself or in offering just advice to people in improving their lives to some degree. So I certainly don't have any training as a counselor or a psychologist or a therapist in the realm of traditional talk therapy, nor would I want to pursue that path. I believe all of us have the ability to receive guidance from our intuitive selves, our intuitive centers, and in sort of practicing that for myself and in practicing holding that space for my clients, some things would come through, some messages or insights, and that's ultimately what also fed this desire to offer this to a larger audience, to anonymize and generalize the more or less human conditions, the common human conditions that we have, and combined with other personal development work I've done, seminars and books I've read and mentors I've had that help deal with these basic human challenges that made me understand that there's a little bit more to the bodywork practice I have to offer in helping people work through these challenges. The combination of YouTube and having this other component that has organically developed through my practice made me think, well, maybe there's an offering I have here that I could offer on this channel. And in starting this channel, I had to overcome some very significant internal resistance. For one, I don't like social media in general. I don't like having my picture taken. I don't like being on camera. I didn't feel credentialed enough to talk about self-development topics. Again, no training as a like a licensed family therapist or a psychologist of any sort. I question my ability to post regularly just because I have such a full schedule in my private practice. And ultimately, I was encouraged to start a channel anyway because we all make different connections from our training, from our learning sources, from the experiences we have. And ultimately, despite all of my internal resistance and objections, I felt the nudge to follow opening up this other path, which is really an adjunct to my private practice, having the same goal as I offered my bodywork practice, only instead of with hands-on work, it's through this medium of offering pragmatic insights to help people live happier and more empowered lives and embody their optimum potential. So what I've learned along this path is that there is great value in combining rational linear thought with intuition. My early life experience and certainly my technical training was all oriented toward employing rational linear thought. And there are some great benefits of using rational linear thought. It's incorporating analysis of data. You're using verifiable evidence. You use logic and reason to make sensible decisions, and you can map out a sequence of steps toward a goal. And all of that is lovely and great, and I am a spreadsheet lover, have been for years, and that certainly has a time and a place. However, if that's only the component that's steering the ship, there can be some shortcomings to it. And what I found from my own experience is that it's easy to be too reductionist in seeking solutions. You might miss the bigger picture, not seeing the forest through the trees sort of thing. It can also stifle exploring more creative or non-traditional solutions to a problem, and it really tends to ignore or devalue the emotional well-being, especially when applied to personal decision-making. So when you're making a change, a leap of faith, as it is, really requires trust that all is well and will be well. And that can be really difficult to do if you're only operating from that linear, rational decision-making frame of mind. And so taking these leaps of faith, I believe doing so judiciously requires discernment. And discernment is, in my view, in my understanding, is this combination of rational thought, intuition, and emotional intelligence, kind of all together. So aside from the rational thought piece, the intuition is really having the ability to understand something without conscious reasoning. And it can be kind of tricky, I believe, because it's a subjective thing. It does involve some pattern recognition that's often seasoned by our past experience. It's really listening to that gut feeling. And I believe in a larger sense, it's recognizing that intelligence comes in different forms. I've certainly observed this in my practice where there's somatic or emotional memory, trauma that's stored in the body. There's also muscle memory that most of us are familiar with, where there are neural pathways that are well developed to perform complex actions without thinking about them consciously. And in order to effectively tune into our intuition, there's a requirement to develop emotional intelligence. The reason behind this is since emotional reactivity or unresolved wounds really add noise to intuitive guidance, and often people can be acting from a wound instead of their intuition or true intuitive guidance. And so emotional intelligence really requires the development of self-awareness, a practice of being able to regulate your own emotions and be resilient, having empathy and social awareness, and also developing an understanding of deeper meanings of people and the actions they take, not just relying on superficial appearances. And a lot of this includes patterns like knee-jerk patterns or reactions or identification of fear, often fear-based reactions, whether they're internal reactions or fear-based tactics used by manipulation. And if you're not aware of these patterns that are in place, especially the internal fear messages and the fear-based manipulation of folks from the outside, it can really impede you from taking a leap that may be one of the best things you've done in your life. And one of my favorite authors, Esther Hicks, has this teaching of you can't get it wrong, meaning the idea that whatever next step you take, it's just another step on your path. And it might feel like it has a terminal consequence, but it never really is. And so my encouragement is to really develop this discernment, incorporating a mix of linear and rational thought with the intuition, and cultivating emotional intelligence to help you really more clearly tune into and make use of that intuition. It's so easy for us to discount our intuition, especially if we haven't had any mentorship from people who use that and use it well, use it reliably. Using your intuition, like anything else, takes a bit of practice. It takes some self-awareness, some self-regulation, and some grounding to become more attuned to your own intuitive voice and really be open to listening to those inner voices or nudges to examine, or explore, or reflect more on what may be available to you, especially when considering larger life changes or courses of action. I'd love to know what leaps of faith have you taken in your life and what helped you navigate the course of action during the process. Let me know in the comments below, and certainly let me know if anything in this video resonates with you. If you know of anyone who might benefit from what I've shared here, please forward this video to them. And if you found some value in what I've discussed today, I would certainly appreciate your giving this video a like and clicking on the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. It's free, it only takes a moment, and it really helps support the growth of the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in.